We all know, we discussed it already this morning, that Edward Snowden, an American whistleblower, threw open the whole issue of state surveillance last summer when he started making revelations about what the United States, and to a lesser extent other countries, have been up to in terms of mass surveillance. Just to remind ourselves briefly what he's disclosed, he has disclosed a number of US-run programs, PRISM, Upstream, by which the Americans are getting access to mass communications. He also revealed that our own dear GCHQ has a similar program, a program called Tempora, under which they are accessing international cables running through the United Kingdom. And what they're doing is they are storing in an internet buffer our content of communications for up to 3 days, and what they describe as metadata. I think Shami already alluded this morning to the fact that that's a term that covers, I think, meant to obscure rather than enlighten. What we perhaps refer to in this country as communications data, something that's described and defined in the Regulation of Executive Powers Act, but basically the envelope of communications, details about who you're writing to, when you're writing, where you're writing from, etc. So GCHQ have access to these things and store them for a period of time. And what Edward Snowden revealed was that, this was then published in The Guardian, was that the GCHQ were accessing 600 million telephone events. I'm not sure what a telephone event, presumably a call, every day. And they also revealed that GCHQ have 300 people working on processing this material and 250 people from the NSA, the National Security Agency, the American equivalent of GCHQ, working on this as well. And the reason, one of the reasons it was said that the Americans are so happy to be working in the UK doing this is because the UK has a light oversight regime. This apparently is a way in which the UK government is plugging to the Americans the fact that they can do stuff which the Americans themselves may have difficulty doing.
We're acting for 8 individuals, a gentleman called Abdul Hakim Belhaj and his wife, and Mr. Sami Al-Sadi, his wife and 4 children. These names may be familiar to you. They're 8 individuals who the UK and US intelligence services arranged to be kidnapped from the Far East and then taken back to Gaddafi's Libya. There was an extraordinary memo which I thought I would read out a paragraph to you, which Human Rights Watch took photographs of when they went into Moussa Koussa, who was the head of the intelligence for Gaddafi, into his office after he kind of ran away from Libya when Gaddafi fell. And this was a memo which it says is from Mark in London and ends with the initial M, and it's to Moussa in Tripoli. And the last paragraph reads, "Most importantly, I congratulate you on the safe arrival of Abu Abd Allah Sadiq. This was the least we could do for you and for Libya to demonstrate the remarkable relationship we have built over recent years. I'm so glad I was grateful. I am so glad. I was grateful to you for helping the officer we sent out last week. Abu Abd Allah's information on the situation in this country is of urgent importance to us. Amusingly, we got a request from the Americans to channel requests for information from Abu Abd Allah through the Americans. I have no intention of doing any such thing. The intelligence about Abu Abd Allah was British. I know I did not pay for the air cargo, but I feel I have the right to deal with you direct on this, and I'm very grateful to you for the help you're giving us."
Disgraceful.
So very, very clear involvement of the British intelligence in the extraordinary rendition of these 8 individuals, 4 of whom were children at the time. So a second case I took this year was about the UK intelligence services role and whether we were providing what's called locational intelligence to the US, which was then being used in CIA drone attacks in Pakistan. This was a case that we took on behalf of a gentleman called Noor Khan. He lives in North Waziristan in Pakistan, and his father was a member of a local jirga, which is a kind of a peaceful council of tribal elders, and it's used. It's almost like a court process. It's used in a way to resolve commercial disputes in the area. Anyway, on the 17th of March last year, Noor's father was chairing a jirga, and what is thought to have been a CIA drone came over the airspace, and a missile came down and hit that meeting. and Noor's father and 40 other people were killed as a result. There were some evidence in a few years ago, particularly in the Sunday Times, when a whistleblower said that the UK intelligence services were providing intelligence to the US about the location of people, which was then used in the targeting of drones by the CIA in Pakistan. So we, as a result of that whistleblower, as a result of Noor coming to us and saying that he was very concerned the UK was involved, we wrote to the Secretary of State asking for clarification on the policies and practices that the UK government has in place in relation to in relation to the provision of intelligence to the US when it's known it's going to be used in drone attacks. We asked them to explain whether they have a policy, whether they have a practice, what their view is on the law. And they wrote back telling us they can neither confirm nor deny or provide any responses to any of our questions posed.
And for the past decade, the US has used drones to launch bombing raids in countries where there's no internationally recognised armed conflict, to target Al-Qaeda and a sort of very ill-defined set of international affiliates in Pakistan, Yemen and Somalia. If you speak to the British government about these drone strikes, it's at pains to sort of draw a line between its use of drones and the US's use of drones. They really want to establish that the British use of drones is absolutely legal. It falls within, established armed conflict laws. They're very keen to point out that they are not using drones in the same way as the US. But the question is the British government facilitating some of those drone strikes, as Rosa says, by providing locational intelligence, by providing by monitoring signals, which could then tip off the US government as to where a particular individual is. What was really striking in the Noor Khan case was how determined the government was not to present any kind of statement. They fielded 3 top QCs. It was really stunning looking at, I was in court for that, and it was really stunning looking at their front bench. It was 3 sort of legal silverbacks, basically. They spent thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on making sure that they weren't saying anything. In Australia, it was reported last year in the wake of the Snowden revelations that there was a facility called Pine Gap where locational information was being shared with the US that was being used for drone strikes in Afghanistan, but also in Pakistan. What was striking about that, Australia is another one of the Five Eyes intelligence community where intelligence is shared in huge amounts of detail. And it was not only being used for drone strikes in Afghanistan, but also these covert strikes in Pakistan. And then there are specific cases that really raise questions about the relationship between the British and the US intelligence communities. One of the cases that we've looked at a great deal in the past year is the case of 2 young men named Bilal Bajawi and Mohammed Saka. These were both young men who'd grown up in London. Mohammed Saka was born in London, actually. And they left the UK for Somalia. They went to Somalia in 2009. And there is strong evidence that each of these men was involved in terrorist acts, or involved in planning terrorist acts, at least. And in 2010, the British government took away their citizenship. It removed their British citizenship in 2 separate orders issued a month apart from each other. Now, 18 months later, each of these men was killed in a in a US drone strike, and those drone strikes were 1 month apart. So you have to look at what the relationship between the loss of these men's British citizenship and their eventual deaths in US drone strikes could have been. Did removing their citizenship remove a barrier to sharing intelligence on them, for example? We simply don't know, but it seems beyond a coincidence. And of course, drone strikes are only one aspect of counter-terrorism action. There's another young man called Mahdi Hashi, another young Londoner, who also lost his citizenship in Somalia. Within 6 weeks of his losing his citizenship, he was in custody in Djibouti, a small country to the north of Somalia, where he was questioned by Americans. He was then handed over into US custody and hooded, put on a plane with no extradition proceedings, and flown to New York, where he's now spent over 18 months in solitary confinement in conditions which have been described as torture by the UN Special Rapporteur, and he's been held there awaiting terrorism charges. Again, what is the connection between the loss of his citizenship and his current predicament? It does suggest very strong intelligence links. So again, we've got no smoking gun, but we've got very compelling questions. To date, we've counted more than half a dozen British citizens who've been killed in US drone strikes. Now, it's unlikely that all of these men were the key targets of the strikes in which they were killed, but the question is what intelligence has been shared on them, either before their deaths or afterwards with the British government.